Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Inside Scoop. My name is Neil Crawford. I'm your host and also the founder of Anytime Soccer Training. If you're a loyal listener to the show, you know that over the last few weeks, we dug deep into mental performance, training, resiliency, grit. I've offered my opinions and I've had special guests on to give us expert tips and to lend themselves to the community to answer specific questions. And that's what we're going to do today. I am so proud to present to you guys a fellow by the name of Robert Price. Robert, you are the owner of Elite Minds and a mental performance coach. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Neil. Thank you guys for having me. And I'm excited to be able to provide some feedback and also just some guidance in this area. I know that your listeners are out there wondering how to improve the mindset of their soccer kids. And so my job is to help do that. And I like to come alongside parents in doing that. So I'm excited to be on the Inside Scoop with you.
Thank you. Now, I received permission from my older brother to share this quick testimonial of how I met you.
Okay.
So over the holidays, as a family does, I was visiting my family in Charlotte, and I have a nephew that's 15. I can't even say his name without laughing because he makes me laugh. And I was giving him and my older son a ride somewhere. And my nephew was talking so positively because my brother and I went to Morehouse. He was talking about he wants to go to Morehouse and he wants to do this and he wants to do that. He's gotten into options trading and he's gotten a part-time job and he wants to make some extra money so he can learn how to trade and do this kind of stuff because that's what my nerdy brother's into. My nephew was so positive that I actually thought to myself that he was just saying that to impress me. And I went to my older brother and I said, "Man, he's really positive." And my brother was like, "Oh, I didn't tell you. We hooked up with this guy who's been working with him, and it's been a major transformation." And that's actually how you got on my radar screen. It was perfect timing because I just started delving into this area because my older son now is a teenager and he plays at a high level, which we talk about in the podcast. And this is a frontier that I wanted to get on top of. So let's talk about your general process. Who do you target? Who are great candidates for what you do? Why do people come to you? What are some
Sure.
of the results? I'm just throwing a lot out there, but we're just having a conversation.
Sure. So one of the beautiful things is in my line of work, I get to share with people that I've been now, which is scary to say, I've actually been doing this work since 2000. I know if you're listening to the podcast that you won't see how young I am, but if you're watching this podcast, you'll see how young I am. So I've been at this since 2000. So now we're into the 24th year of this space. And which is an amazing blessing. And so one of the thoughts that I share with people is that my job is really to help people become self-aware of how you think and how that impacts your performance. And so I would say that the ideal client or the ideal parent is twofold. One is someone like yourself who talked a little bit about uh, how can I be proactive in actually building these skills for my athlete. I think that's a great client to have. That means that I'm actually able to walk them through, if you want to call it through a program, step 1, 2, 3, kind of process. And then there are people who come to me because their kid or the athlete themselves is in a bit of a rut, a mental rut. We're having some mental challenges. And so what I share with parents is then my job is to help them truly identify the source of their poor performance. So you come, either proactively or you come reactively in a way of like, these things aren't working for me. And then I'm able to help people actually identify their true source of their poor performance. And then both of those athletes, ultimately, we start implementing performance strategies. We start reinforcing the champion mindset in training and practice. And then ultimately, in their events that they're, their actual performance on field or on the pitch in your world. So that's one of the things that I love to do. So that's the ideal person, is like there's a reactive parent because the kid is struggling. And then I'm going to help identify the true source of those poor performances, and then teaching them the mental skills to prevent those things from actually continuing. And then there's the parents that are coming proactively because they recognize that there is some percentage of the work that they're doing that is mental, and they know that they need an expert to help them do that. And that's where I come in. So those are the two types of clients that come my way over the course of my time. And then that's essentially how I get them to start trusting the strategies, the training strategies, so that they can implement them in real-time performances.
Okay, so in terms of your background,
Yeah.
you played which sport at a high level?
Sure, I played football at a high level, and I'm going to tease this audience because my first love was soccer.
Oh, really?
So yeah, and I'll give you a fairly quick story around that. So football was chosen for me. I'll say it that way, but I'll give you the story. But I played soccer starting at the age of like 3. Love soccer. It's one of, like, literally my first love of sport. And so I played it all the way until I was a sophomore in high school. And so because I grew up in Ohio, soccer and football were the same season. And so I was on the varsity football team, but I was also on the varsity soccer team. And so obviously I did not go to soccer practice, but I was on like travel teams and all those things. And so I would come and I would be basically the first guy off the bench in the soccer games. And so at some point back in the day, soccer wasn't necessarily going to get you a full ride into college. And I knew that that was how I was going to go to school. And so my soccer coach, football coach, and athletic director and principal all sat in a meeting and told me, hey, you're going to do football. And I said, I don't want to just do that. But that's how my football life really began to continue to take off, because again, I did get a scholarship to play Division I football at University of Pittsburgh, and then I ended up transferring to Hampton University to kind of continue my career and doing what I wanted to do. But yeah, so I was very fortunate. But soccer is my first love. That's my soccer story. So yeah.
Yeah, and the reason that's relevant, and great story, that's the reason that's relevant to parents who are listening to this show is because, of course, we're not experts on in terms of what the medical field does or performance coaching does. But when we go into consultations and to people who are not familiar with elite athletics, you spend 30 minutes trying to explain to them it's a lot of time. I know it's crazy. It's a lot of money at times. It's a lot of travel. I get it. I know if you're not involved in it, it's completely bananas. So then once they sort of understand that, then you start having the real conversations where when you and my son spoke, it was like, okay, I know exactly what's going on in terms of the big picture. Let's
Yeah.
just talk about you. You don't have to have these long conversations about, yeah, we practice 4 days a week. Yeah, we have a tournament in Florida. It is what it is.
I
So
understand your whole life. Yes.
how do you feel about that and your ability to relate to elite athletes? And as I say that, I believe you have children who play, I think, or golf at a high level, right?
Absolutely. So from a parental space, I have 4 kids, a 16-year-old daughter, 14-year-old son, 10-year-old son, and an 8-year-old son. And my 14 and 16-year-old, this time they travel with golf. And we have all the things that, a soccer parent has as far as tournaments. And I was teasing a friend of mine, actually. We were playing in Orlando a couple weeks ago, and their kid who plays soccer was playing in Orlando. We were in the same place at the same time doing different things. But so I understand it from a parental space as well. So just working with these athletes and understanding, like, there is inherent pressure. They do want to please mom and dad all the time. That's part of who they are as kids. We always wanted to please our parents too, but to really get them to start working on this in this space is really, I mean, it's crucial. Everybody needs to know the importance of working, on the mental side of their sport.
Yeah, so let's pivot for a second and talk about identity. As a parent, and this is the overlap from sort of parental, the area of just being a parent, the individual's own personality, and then the sport. So juxtaposing all of that.
Mm,
One of my concerns as it relates to my children, and a concern that you read about often, is that consequence of the child entire identity being wrapped up in the sport, especially
sure.
when they're really good at it. And one of the things you said in our informational interview that stuck with me is helping the child understand, well, just asking the question, what's going to happen if this is not part of your life? What are you going to do if soccer is not part of your life? For my nephew, it was, what are you going to do if football was not a part of your life? So let's talk about strategies, conversations, questions about decoupling to the best you can your self-worth from the sport.
Sure. That's such a we could be on here for months, but I will tell you that ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, is like the true source of your poor performance. That's a big deal. Because that part of that is identity of like, well, who are you? And I oftentimes in some other work that I've done in the past, when I did interviewing for the NFL and teams, is asking players like, I really wanted to know who they thought they were. What truly is their identity? Do they see themselves outside of their sport? Because once you do that, then it becomes a lot easier actually to manage the goals, the expectations, the successes and failures that come within the sport. Because you know that successes and failures come, and they're not necessarily just tied to me individually. That's just part of what it is that I'm doing. And so I really try to help my athletes specifically talk them through, well, who they really are, who are they been created to be, because once they have that true identity of themselves, then it's a lot easier again to just get them to understand they're not just a soccer player, they're not just a football player, they're not just a golfer, that you're who you are, and then you do this thing. And so getting them to understand that. And I think sometimes for parents, obviously, we want to share that message with our children. But again, I have kids and I know how it goes is oftentimes you just need to have another voice. And I always often tell parents, I'm going to tell the kids, I hope if you're training them accordingly, similar things that you've been telling them, but because they're coming to me as an expert, it's going to hit different. And so, but I think that's part of, surrounding ourselves with mentors and people who know certain areas or certain expertise, because then it does hit different. And that's what we want. And I think a good parent helps get a kid in those circles, so that way we're really bending them toward the things that they have been created to be.
All right. So now let's talk about the stakeholders that are in the child's life, the key ones, and how does that factor into the program that you would, or the course you would put a child on? And
Yes.
so when I think of the stakeholders, it's especially sports related, it's going to be the parent or parents or caretaker. It's going to be the coach or coaches, and to some extent, it can be the teachers as well.
Hmm.
And let's talk about the parents, for example. In a conversation you had with my older son as we were going through this exploration process, you had a conversation with him. You had a conversation with us both
Hmm.
for a couple minutes, and then went away, and you and my son had a conversation. And then I asked you sort of, what does that look like if when we do the whole program,
Sure.
and you gave me some feedback. So, in general, what are the general expectations for a parent of a teenager in terms of like interaction with your courses?
Yeah, so the easy answer, great question. Whenever I'm in, I say somebody hires me, it's the same thing that happens in my office. Is the parent is you're hiring me too, right? So I always say like the parent is going to come alongside their kid. You're with your kid the most. If I can get a coach to come alongside me as well, that's an amazing thing. But ultimately, the parent space is you're going to have access to the same material that I'm giving to your child. And obviously, I'm hoping that you're reading, you're watching the videos that are produced, the lessons that are going on, looking at the homework. doing it for yourself in some aspect, because then you're going to have the same language that is necessary for him or her to be successful. So if that's, my expectation of a parent, or those stakeholders, is to actually come alongside the program with me, because I also do know kids. They're going to say, how, you're going to say, how did it go? They're going to say, fine. Well, what you learn? A lot. Well, what you gonna do with it? I'm gonna implement. I'm gonna do it. And you're like, well, what did y'all really talk about? And then, then it's this. And so really for me, it's easy. You'll be able to have better conversations. So what was effective thinking about? Or did you do that P3 think, the homework, and it was about this? Oh, what about that? And now you're having the language that I'm also using and he's using, or she's using. And now we're coming down the road together. Because again, you have more impact. If I'm with your kid for an hour, half an hour, 30, 40, 50 minutes once a week, well, that's cool, but there's 168 hours in the week. And so I want to make sure that their language is being changed and how they think it's being changed. And obviously those stakeholders are the folks that are going to be able to help me do that in absence of me.
So in a practical level, does that look like there's sessions where, or is the kid and you going to be doing the primary talking without the parent so that the child feels comfortable or whatever, and then the parent can participate at sometimes, or are you having side conversations with the parent, or a little bit of all the above depending on the client
Yeah,
situation?
depends on the client situation, but mostly it's all of the above. Depending on, some kids are in academies, some kids are in boarding schools, and so obviously the parent is not in the room with them. But then we set up times for me and the parent to have conversations about where the kid is and what part of the program they're in, and making sure that they're staying connected to that as well. So that way, when they're having conversations, they know exactly what to be having those conversations around. So it's a combination of all those said things.
So in terms of managing expectations, one thing I can definitely picture, especially when it comes to, and I'm using my air quotes, alpha parents, is this can be very transactional. The approach is, if I can just give my child the edge, you
Mm.
know, all the top athletes are doing this. And I'm not necessarily saying that's intrinsically bad, right? Because all our top athletes are doing this, and this is very important, and it can give you a competitive advantage. But how do you taper expectations to say, hey, this is a holistic approach for your child's well-being? And what are those conversations like?
Sure. So for me, I really want to make sure that people understand that there are process goals and outcome goals. And so if we're able to, even with the parent, most times parents, just like the athletes, we are driven by those outcome goals, scholarship, this particular team, whatever that looks like. There's those outcomes. They do exist. We're not going to put our head in the sand and say they don't. But the reality of it is that the only way to get to those outcomes is through a process. And I need to be making sure that both parents and athlete are tracking the process goals that we have set up for them to do the thing that we need them to do. So that way they can actually see or be and I call it, be in a position to actually receive the outcome. So oftentimes, I tell parents, it's going to be like, hey, your kid you see the potential in your child, you see the, commitment that they're putting together sometimes, but you're not seeing the outcome. Well, then we actually need to figure out, well, what are the goals that they're setting for themselves? What processes they have in place, and then begin monitoring those things. I am a big math and science person, so I do that with assessment or tools to make sure that we're making sure that we have the right process goals in place, so that way we can actually truly monitor those things and see exactly, are we putting ourselves in position to receive the outcome that we're looking for.
So with your program, you said tools. I know there's a video component. Just break down some of the tangible things, and to some extent the intangible things that your program typically involves.
Sure. So what I share with folks is there's individual sessions with me that last about 30 minutes for that child. Either we do that once a week or once every other week, so twice a month. That's one aspect. The other aspect are videos that I've done. They're me in the video, but teaching the skills specifically to them. They last between 15 to 25 minutes. After those skills are being taught, there typically is homework. And I use that word for real because there's homework. I want them to do stuff because doing the stuff helps me and helps them implement the process. And then there's the time I mentioned to you as well. There's texting and obviously just normal communication going on in between the weeks that we're meeting. There are also articles for parents to read that I've written to make sure that they're just tracking on a more adult space. And then from there also, like I mentioned, I use assessments. I use a pre and post assessment around the 9 mental skills to make sure that the work that I'm doing is actually working. And at the end, we have a post assessment to make sure that we were able to improve on those things as well. So that's a good overview of what this would look like.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions and we're going to wrap this up. So when you hear the word or the phrase negative talk, what comes to mind? I'm just throwing it out there.
Easy.
Negative talk about yourself.
Yeah. Well, what comes to mind is I actually teach and talk through, because science has proven this, that I actually try to get that terminology out of someone's mind, even from a parent. I try to tell people, and which I know is this, is actually what we know is that it's effective talk versus ineffective talk. It's not positive or negative. I use this example. If you're in an area that doesn't have one of these, God bless you. But if your son's on the pitch and he's thinking about this Chick-fil-A milkshake that has the whipped cream and the cherry, oh man, I can't wait. That's a positive thought. It's ineffective for the task at hand. He's not going to get to the space in time. He's not going to draw the double team. He's not going to be able to make the header. He's not going to be able to place the ball in the net the right way. Just can't. Because that thought is ineffective. It's not negative. And I teach parents, I teach my athletes, it's okay to, people have talked about this their whole life, negative thinking. Well, sometimes, as we know this, depending on who you are as an individual, sometimes that negative air quote thinking actually is effective. It is motivational. It's purposeful. It provides an opportunity for you to do something. So you can use quote unquote negative thinking or negative talk to actually help you do something in a way that's productive. And so that's what I share with people all the time, is that when you said that word, that's where it went. We are inherently negative people, but even though we're that way, it's not about negative talk or positive talk. It's really about effective versus ineffective.
I'm learning every day. I was today years old because I've been saying negative talk forever. So thank you. Thank you. Now we're wrapping it up. Okay. So when I say pressure or performing under pressure, or I come to you and say my child is stressed out, again, what are some of the things as it relates to performing in soccer
Yeah,
or any sport?
sure.
Again, how are you tackling that? Is that also a quote unquote potential misdiagnosis of the situation?
Uh, no, I like that one. Pressure is a good one. It actually, when a parent comes and even or the child comes, they talk about pressure. It's all about how they interpret the situation, right? So I get to teach people about their thinking, and what they think is in their control. So do you think that this situation is a pressurized situation? If it is, that's okay too, right? Embrace the pressure, because that maybe will help you perform better or maybe make you perform worse. But we're going to talk through about, well, how do you actually define pressure? Is that your interpretation of it? Why do we look at being at an elite position pressure? I mean, any great player would love to have the first penalty kick, right? The free kick, the indirect kick. Like, you want that because you've been practicing and training, and you're going to trust your training. So to have it in that moment, you're okay with that pressure or perceived pressure because you're prepared for it. You feel like you've done the things you needed to do. So I like when a parent comes to me and say, well, my kid's not necessarily performing under pressure. I think that's a great jumping off point, because then we get to define pressure, we get to actually interpret it. And then if it is actually pressure, then we're going to lean into it because you need it essentially sometimes anyway. And that the more pressure you're under, the more situations you're in where there's perceived pressure, you need that experience. That's help builds confidence over the course of a long term. So I'm okay with that word. It's good. I take it.
Oh, okay, so two more questions, and then I'm gonna give you the final word. So the first one is, I know you work with individuals, obviously, but do you ever work with small groups? And if so, just walk us through that dynamic.
Sure. Actually, I actually have a Facebook group specifically for golfers right now. So I do work with groups. I work with teams. Usually in a virtual space, we just kind of come collectively together. I'm with COVID happening. People are actually familiar with that. You just kind of collectively come together as a group at a specified time, and then that way people are able to individually get questions answered. You get a full hour of my time when we do it that way. So that way we can make sure that everything is getting taken care of. So again, yes, group work it works. It's actually a really good thing. You get to feed off of each other. They're actually going through the courses at the same time. And then we're actually able to kind of work through those skills collectively together. So 100%.
Do you see it as something that even if you did it with two people, they don't feel like, I'm talking, especially for, there's a stigma associated with getting any help, period. But that lessens the stigma because now it's like two, at least two or more doing it
Yeah,
together.
we're doing it together. So um, it does help. I'll just give you a quick story. Sometimes when I'm working with athletes and they end up playing together, they see certain things that we're working on together. I have some signature things sometimes. And so they're like, you doing that too? And the person's, yeah, I do that. And then they usually end up in a conversation around, well, I work with so-and-so. I work with him too. This literally just happened, by the way. And so it's always fun. And then they have a conversation or a dialogue about it. So I do think when two or more gather, right? It's a good thing. It helps alleviate a little bit of anxiety, pressure, or stress sometimes that exists. So yeah, two is good.
All right. So you threw out the quarter of century mark number. Just trying to make
No,
you sound even older. So you obviously remember pre-social media, iPhones, apps, all that in post. So how has that changed? And I hate to use the word industry, but change your approach. And how have you had to adapt your approach? And what trends are you seeing that's different than when you started in
uh,
general?
yeah. So obviously, you actually hit on one. There's a lot more ability to do group work all over the world. I see clients. I share this with you in Europe on Thursdays that do this particular sport. So I'll let your audience kind of take that and think about what happens in Europe. There are real good leagues in Europe, right? That's where if you're depending on who you are out there to play this sport, if you can get to Europe, you're doing all right.
Hmm.
So there's some group work that I get to do there, but obviously I'm across the sea, so that's easy a trend. I think social media in and of itself, if used appropriately, I'm not very good at it to be honest, but if used appropriately, it can yield great benefit. And I think for our kids, again, it speaks to the identity space. We have to really work on them and getting them to understand that usually social media, depending on how you go on there, it is used as a comparison tool. And so how do you monitor that? How do you manage that? I think is huge. And so um, and I think that's been the biggest trend. I think being able to have access to people or direct access to people in an expert way is huge. I think there's great benefit to that. I also know, and I share this often, I think reading a book or watching a TikTok or Instagram post or an Instagram video, awesome. But that doesn't allow you or give you the depth that you need to actually do this work or actually to receive this work either. So there's cautionary tale around that, right? So I think that really checking the background of whoever it is you're working with. If it's not me, that's fine. But being able to understand like what's their training, who are they, do they really go to school for it? I think that's huge. So social media, sometimes you can't quite see all that. So I, absolutely engage people in that process. I mean, you received a referral directly from somebody who had my like touched and had the service, and that is huge. And I think that trend doesn't change. So I think that's important.
Oh, so you telling me if I listen to a bunch of Eric Thomas videos, that's not enough for me to be able to do what you do?
I mean,
Even
you can be motivational, but I think what I share with people is it's almost like the word we talked about, positive or negative. Like that's important, but you need to understand beneath that, and being able to leverage that only comes because you've been doing it for a while, or you're a true expert at what you do. Right? I mean, YouTube is an amazing thing. You could probably botch a surgery by watching YouTube, but I don't think you put your life in the hands of somebody who learned it on YouTube. I just don't think so. I think you're going to put your life in the hands of somebody who went to school for it and spend a lot of money, time, and energy to become an expert at what they do. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
and that's one of the reasons why I enjoy doing this show is because I want to make sure that our members have access to trusted folks in the field who others have used and say, yes, I saw this success. And we're going to end with this to give you the final word. When I see, and I'm going circling all the way back to my nephew, and he's going to laugh when he sees this, has this mindset. And then the next thing a few months later, I talked to him again, and he had such a positive outlook, so positive that I actually thought he was just trying to impress me. If you had to put your services in a nice bow for conclusion, in the conclusion, what did I see? I saw he was here. Now he's so positive. His talking is so positive. He got a part-time job. He's so excited. He's so pleasurable to be around, even to my wife. Even my wife noticed it, his aunt. What am I seeing happening in a nutshell?
Sure. So I would say what you're seeing is somebody who, to be honest, is having they have self-awareness that they are in control of the things that they think. So when I say when I get to the end of working with someone, they're going to have awareness of how they think and that they're in control of the things they think. And since they're in control of the things they think, that means they're going to have some level of control over the way they feel and what they do. And that's ultimately what we do. We want to make sure that I always say, I say this in lots of areas of my life, but if I'm aware, then that means I'm aware of the things that I think. I'm in control of those things. Those things will impact how I feel and what I do, which obviously have a direct impact on our performance. So that's what you saw with your nephew, is that you saw that he became more aware of how he is thinking, things he's saying, aware of what he's thinking. He knows that that's going to impact how he feels and what he does, and you're going to see a direct impact on his performance, literally out on the field for him specifically, or on the pitch for some of those who are listening. So that's what you would see in this process.
Guys, this has been a wonderful conversation. Robert, I'm going to get you back on next year as well, just to give us updates on how you're doing. And I'm sure you'll be able to share some testimonies from folks in the group that we're going to share this with. Robert, you are the owner of Elite Minds. Where are you based at, though?
Sure. So I'm actually in Savannah, Georgia. Is my now home. I lived in Maryland, DC area for a long time, but now I'm here in good old Savannah, Georgia.
Okay. And you are a mental performance coach, former D1 athlete, and much, much more. Father of kids that range the whole age spectrum as well, who are going through this. So you're bringing a lot of perspective to the table. And again, you have over 24 years of experience in this field. Guys, my name is Neil Crawford. I'm the host of the Inside Scoop and also the founder of Anytime Soccer Training. Let's get better together. I bet you've spent hours searching YouTube, Instagram, and the internet for soccer drills. And when you find them, the videos are not follow along, they're not easy for your child to use, and they don't go step by step. We created Anytime Soccer Training to solve this problem and more. Anytime Soccer Training is the only online training program with thousands of follow-along training videos that are easy to follow, go step by step, and cover every area of soccer. And if that's not enough, the program is fun with hundreds of skill challenges, soccer games, leaderboards, and cool prizes that all kids love. So what are you waiting for? Save time with a program that works. Go to anytime-soccer.com today and get started.